Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. It's Sunday the 3rd of November. I'm Phil Carroll.
And I'm Kevin Hornsby.
Where has the year gone, Kev? November already. I mean, 2025 beckons. What's happened? Have we lost 10 months of the year already?
No, we didn't lose it. Lots happened, other than the market wasn't good again. Though, I'm trying to be ever the optimist that I feel that we've got to get this American election out the way, and then is there anything else in the way then of people thinking, let's go? You know,
Yeah.
we've had a budget which hasn't exactly helped. I was speaking with some of you know John the baker, but I was speaking with him, and you all know he makes biscuits, and it's obviously very heavy on staff. They need a lot of staff, so he employs hundreds of people. I think £600,000 a year extra in staff costs because of that budget.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of small to medium businesses that are going to unfortunately end up going under because you're just writing into the profit there. And it actually, there was a guy on Question Time last night, philanthropist and investor, who comes in to help ailing businesses. He was really well spoken, and he basically said in front of the Labour, some of the Labour MPs, that when you do this with NI and increase that, and exactly, he said he knew a mate who had a £30 million revenue business. It was going to cost him similar amount, about £800,000 extra in NI costs. And he said he's going to be laying off 90 to 100 staff. Now, he said 90 or half of those 90 may potentially go back into another job where they'll be putting back into the economy. But 45 of those will probably end up becoming unemployed, then claim benefits. So ultimately, you're not encouraging growth, are you? At what point does increasing and putting a massive burden on these small to medium companies, which are the growth factor of the UK economy, it stifles it?
Yeah. But it's only going to take one big FTSE company to say, I had enough of that. I'm out.
I mean, there's already companies talking about relocating, moving employment to New York or to the US, to Europe, to basically bring staff on who can work remotely from Europeans, so they don't have to worry about the NI side of things, or moving divisions of it over to Europe. So it's already happening. But I mean, I just got back from New York, as I talked about on last week's show with Rick, and an amazing city. I mean, umpteenth visit, and it never ever disappoints. It really is one of my favorite cities. But the election fever over there. I mean, we were there on the Sunday when Trump arrived in town. There was a massive rally on at Madison Square Gardens, ironically, where some of the biggest boxing matches and wrestling tournaments have been held over the years. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a big warm-up act by a comedian and podcaster, a guy called Tony Hinchcliffe. And he mocked Latinos, for irresponsibility, called Jews mean and Palestinians rock throwers. And then he had to go at the Puerto Ricans, which is, that is one of the sort of demographics that Trump is trying to win over. And he said it was an island of garbage. But I mean, he's potentially just lost 3% of Puerto Rican votes. So it's kind of like backfired. But what I got from listening to the whole of the rally was it was just attacking Kamala Harris, attacking all different, different races and creeds. And it was just a hate fest. And it seems to me like this whole US election is really built on division of the US. And it does worry me that if Trump is a winner, that you could potentially lead to civil war. What's he going to do to all these people that have been very outspoken of him? Is it going to lead to civil war? And it just feels such a divided nation right now, does the US.
Is it any different than 4 years ago, though? Not a lot, in my view. I think
it just got worse because what did he do 4 years ago? He marched. He got his supporters to march on the Senate, and effectively it was insurrection, wasn't it? People were killed in that. And
well, there's arguments that was all big setup as well. But anyway, yes, I know what you mean.
Depends what sort of a conspiracy theorist you want to believe, doesn't it? But ultimately, he was never brought to task for that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And I think you're right. I think there was a lot hanging in the balance and uncertainty with interest rates and various, the market with the budget. And bringing on to the budget, it was the biggest budget in history in terms of the amount of tax rises. She gambled on 40 billion tax rise, historical in the sense that it was the first budget ever delivered by a female chancellor, first Labour budget for 14 years. But I don't know if you saw that. Obviously, we had a good chat with Charles during the week, and there is a midweek special budget, so we urge people to listen to that. But the reaction was initially very good, wasn't it? The AIM 100 or all AIM share market responded with about 4%, but the day after that we saw quite a big reversal, didn't we, in AIM and also within the FTSE? But did you look at gilt yields and the response to them?
Yep, they've gone up.
Yeah,
So basically, what it's saying is that it's expecting that the UK government is going to have to pay more for this debt, and that's what the market was signaling to it. Same
yeah,
time, and the pound went down as well, around 1 to 2 cents against the dollar. It's recovered a bit now, I have to say. So, and I think there was scaremongering as well. Let's be honest. It's
yeah.
it's a political game, so there's scaremongering because when she put her budget scenario in place, the OBR gave her a 1.2% variation on the price of the gilts, and she lost half of that in one day. But then it's started to ease off again, I think now. So we'll see. I mean, none of us want a flipping disaster, do we? Really, be honest. To be honest,
No.
in terms of the economies, but
But I think the
it,
problem with it is, Kev, now is what we're going to see is interest rates were due to, it looked like the Tories had inflation under control to a certain extent. And then just as we started to see interest rates coming down from that 5.25 to the 5, it looks now that they will fall more slowly. And a lot of economists are saying this. And I think that's pretty apparent from the reaction on these gilt yields as well. It is going to take a lot longer. Mortgage rates are generally, if gilt yields rise, then it often pushes mortgage rates and loan rates up, as obviously banks and lenders have to adjust to that higher cost of capital. That's the only way they can work it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And they're saying the same thing in the US as well, aren't they? Because, so it's not just that. And at the same time, we've seen a much stronger dollar since the 0.5% reduction in their interest rate. The dollar went down to a basket of 99.99 or whatever it was. It went just below the 100 figure, and now it's bounced all the way back to 104, and it's now about 103.5, which has affected the pound as well, because the pound was at 134 at one point, and now it's gone back down to 129. It's a game, but the reality is, in my view, US dollar still massively overvalued. Can't have that much debt and that much payments, as we saw with Rick. We were talking with Rick last week, and Rick Rule, and he was absolutely pulling no punches, wasn't he, when it came to slating the US lending and economy? It was absolutely incredible.
Other news, I mean, there was obviously we saw the floods in Spain, and the climate change has intensified deadliest extreme weather events over the past 2 decades, contributing to over, they say, 500,000 deaths, according to scientists, with 1.3 degrees C of global warming. Extreme weather events have become increasingly dangerous. I don't know if you saw this in Spain, but it was pretty grim, wasn't it? I mean, they didn't really get much warning, from what I can gather, seeing on X that the water levels started rising in Valencia on the Thursday afternoon, and then literally it was like started a deluge of water, almost like a mini tsunami. And you kind of don't expect that. I mean, I know you've lived in Spain in the past, but it did affect Malaga as well. But could you imagine that, seeing people being washed away down motorways, and it's just there was not given any warning. So there's a lot of people very cross with the government. They said that there should have been some warnings to evacuate the areas. The death toll's rising by the day. I mean, it's incredible seeing scenes like this from Spain.
Drainage is not good enough, but I mean the reality is, I mean, I saw the pictures of the cars floating down the
I
down the
mean, one of
street.
them, it was like a
Horrendous.
scrapyard, wasn't it? Like literally piled
Yeah.
up high. I mean, I've never seen
No.
carnage like that. So,
Not good at all. But as I said before, budget's out the way. Now we're looking at the final of the election, which is going to be what, Wednesday or Thursday of next week, and then hopefully it's settled quickly, one way or the other.
well, the
Or
election's on Tuesday, yeah, the 5th.
Tuesday. Okay, so it's Tuesday, so we should have an answer by Wednesday or Thursday, you'd imagine. But then there's going to be some oohing and ahhing about votes here, there, and everywhere, I'm sure. So yeah, let's
So
just hope.
If Trump loses, do you think he'll kick off again, like the sort of kicking off about the count? And from what I can gather, it's done by one of these news agencies. I don't know whether it's Alliance News. It's one of the big news agencies like Reuters that does the count these days. They have a team of about 1,000, from what I can gather, who do all the vote counting. But last time he was complaining about 7 million vote difference. I mean, it wasn't like, I'm not saying it was a landslide, but there was 7 million more votes. So it'd be interesting to see how he reacts to it.
I think a better question is, will either side kick off if they lose? And I think the answer is possibly yes. I don't think it matters whether it's Republican or Democrats. I think that, they got one side's going to kick off. There is a lot of angst, isn't there, between the two sides? I mean, it's not like it's a pleasant situation at all. Yeah, and it was interesting to hear good old Rishi Sunak after the budget, because he
ranted, wasn't
he ranted. I wish he'd shown that much passion when he was prime minister, because I don't think he did. Whereas when he was opposition, he ranted and raved, and I was impressed with the way he put it, because he was being very truthful, and I think that's how the markets accepted it as well. So we will see. AIM as a whole doesn't seem to have been demolished anyway. Let's put it that way. It was more a tweak than a let's get rid of this. So I think people can still use it for inheritance tax relief, and the ones who are in it are probably going to stay in it. What's the point if not? You might as well still have a 20% reduction in the amount over £1 million. So yeah, the biggest hike obviously was £25 million worth of national insurance. Now, the question I pose is, if people are going to change decisions, and I mean business owners change decisions, are we in a situation where that actual 25 billion will not materialize because basically they won't be able to employ that many people?
Is 25 billion into the NHS, as they said last night on Question Time. The definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And they've ploughed billions in the past, and you will not fix the NHS with 25 billion. It's a broken system. It's ridiculous. And that is a big waste for me. I'm not saying that they should neglect it totally, but they should come up with a proper economist plan of how to fix a problem like the NHS. That's just my 2 pence on it. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway,
agreed.
I think we've talked enough on this now, so let's move on to our first guest this week. We're joined by Stefan Bernstein, CEO of GreenRoc Strategic Materials. Welcome to the podcast, Stefan.
Thanks, Phil.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, Kevin and I have mentioned and also talked with Charles in the past about GreenRoc. It's a company that's kind of piqued our interest, and obviously through Charles we reached out. So thanks for coming on. Just tell us a bit of background about GreenRoc. So, I mean, obviously, I remember back in, I think it was September of 2021 when I saw the spin out and the announcement of effectively the first day of dealings on AIM after having acquired the portfolio of projects from Alba Mineral Resources. So just take us back through that time. But maybe before that, give us a bit of background about yourself, basically what brought you to GreenRoc.
Right. Okay. So I'm a geologist of education, and I worked all my professional life really with Greenland geology, doing mainly research in the beginning. But from my first year in Greenland, 1987, I was also working part-time for mining companies. So I've had this deep interest in exploration also since the start. And so I've been working for a VP exploration for a private mineral exploration company for some years. And then the last position before coming to GreenRoc was head of department at the Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland. And then a couple of years ago, I was asked if I would take a look at this potential position here with GreenRoc, and I thought that was a great opportunity to be engaged in a very, very exciting project, namely the development of the graphite deposit at Amitsoq. So it didn't take me long to say yes, this is a lifetime opportunity. It's a fantastic project. It's a great country also for mining. So and also the team with GreenRoc was one that I could see myself be working with. So easy choice. Although I must say also I had a great time with the survey. So
yeah,
not that easy.
Yeah, you have to say that, Stefan. You have to keep them. You have to keep them happy, I think. No.
Well, I mean, at the survey, as head of department, you turn out to be like, it's a bit of a family, you got your department, you have to look after the department and work with all these great scientists. So, but, this was just very tempting.
Yeah, so back to what I said about the Alba thing, that let's say the Greenland portfolio of assets that were within Alba, presumably the projects were big enough, or they were deemed big enough to be spun out from, or to be acquired and pushed into a separate entity. So just talk us through some of them, because it wasn't just Amitsoq that was put in there. There are various other projects within the GreenRoc portfolio.
That's correct. So we had 4 projects when I started a couple of years ago, 2022, and those were also part of the portfolio at the original spin-off in 21. And that, so from south to north, Amitsoq Graphite Deposit, and then the Thule Black Sands, the Melville Bay Iron Ore, and then the Inglefield Land Multi-Mineral or Multi-Metal Project. So I think quite early on, it was clear to us that the graphite project was really the one that was taking off. And with the drilling 21, there were some indications that it was a very significant ore deposit. But when we were doing the drilling, following drilling in 2022, it just was amazing the amount of graphite-rich ore that we pulled out of the ground in the drill core. So obviously, we decided quite early on to fast-track Amitsoq. Also because iron ore and the titanium deposits in North Greenland and also the Inglefield Land, it's located in a part of the country which, is quite difficult. It's not undoable to build a mine there, but it has some challenges. So we just decided to focus. So the Inglefield Land, we relinquished. It was a very early project. So we relinquished that in 22, and we are now doing a lot less on the other projects, simply because we put all our efforts into Amitsoq.
Very good. Stefan, tell what's the connection then between Denmark and Greenland? Are they owned by the same country, or?
So Greenland is part of the Danish kingdom. It's 2 separate countries in the sense that Greenland has their own parliament. Most of the countries, what you would say, administration is run by Greenland. There's a few things such as defense, foreign policy, and justice, which is partly run by the Danish state. But it is a very well-functioning country with all these administrative functions in place, being decided by Greenland politicians. So a large level of independence from Denmark.
So it's a bit like England, Scotland, England, Wales type scenario, only maybe even more so.
Yeah, I don't. Well, maybe Scotland and Wales. I've traveled to. I think Greenland is different in the sense that the culture, the Inuit culture, is very distinctly different, of course, from the Danish.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of family connections now and interaction between the cultures, and has been for several hundred years. But the Greenlanders obviously have their own cultural background, and the language is also very different from any other language. So that puts it.
Is this similar to the Faroe Islands? Is it a similar sort of thing going on there? Or is it because that is apparently an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark as well?
Yeah, it's the same story. Both of these countries have their own parliaments, but the Faroes is more like Iceland in terms of cultural background. So it's a Norse background with a language that has some common words or words in common with Danish. Greenlandic, Inuit, it's completely different. It's a beautiful language, quite difficult to learn.
Okay, so Amitsoq Graphite Project then is located where in Greenland?
Yes, so Greenland is a huge country, 2,500 kilometers from the southern tip to the northern tip. There's only some few hundred kilometers from the northern tip of Greenland to the North Pole. So that part of Greenland is very, very far north. The southern tip of Greenland, on the other hand, is at the same latitude as southern Norway or northern Scotland, so really not that far to the north. Amitsoq is one of the southernmost tips of in the southernmost tip of Greenland. It's located about 20 kilometers away from the Nanortalik. Nanortalik is is the southernmost town in Greenland. And because it's relatively mild climate, there's no winter ice on the fjords. Amitsoq is located right next to a deep water fjord, so it's excellent location. Easy shipping, quite close to reasonably good infrastructure. There's the town has a harbor and schools, a hospital, and everything is in place. So great place for mining and mining activities. And, the old timers also found that when the graphite was first discovered about 100 years ago, they established a mining operation there. So Amitsoq is basically reopening and a producing mine. It was closed in 1922.
So, Stefan, when they were mining it 100 plus years ago, what they were mining obviously for graphite. What was the usage of that graphite at that time?
Yeah, pencils. But then also as exactly, and then also as a carbon razor for steel production.
Okay.
Also like casts for steel, various iron productions, lubrication, and many of the other uses that are more like traditional uses still at this day. So I think, and one of the reasons it stopped, the production stopped, was that after the First World War, there was a lot of resource production that ceased because of the ceasefire and after the First World War.
Okay, so from the perspective of Greenland, what other mining takes place in Greenland, and how do the people of Greenland sort of accept or deny, this type of stuff going on?
Okay, that's a good question. There has been with the example from Amitsoq, a 100-year-old mine, you can see that there's a long mining history in Greenland. And that is not the only mine. There's a cryolite mine, an aluminum-type mineral to the west of Amitsoq that has been mined also for about 100 years, from the mid-1800 to like 40 years ago. There's the Black Angel mine. Cominco ran a lead zinc mine quite far up to the north, the halfway up a very steep mountain face, the Black Angel mine. And then another prominent mine is the Nalunak gold mine, which is operated by Amaroq. It's also being reopened now. It was active in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that is actually very nearby. It's just across the fjord that the Nalunak mine is being reopened now. So the general attitude to mining in Greenland, I think, generally is very positive. They have had positive experience from the mining operations that have been there. Of course, the environmental regulations is much stricter today. That is just something which is really good, because then there won't be these various scales of pollutions that you have seen, for instance, with the lead zinc mine up in the north. That wouldn't happen today. Today, everything is much better regulated. And on the background of that, I think I can say that the Greenland government is very pro-mining. They really like to see building up a mineral industry in Greenland. And so do the local populations in Nanortalik, Qaqortoq, Narsaq, and the other towns. As long as, of course, it's done in a responsible way.
Yeah, they don't want you going in there and blowing everything up and digging it up in the wrong way or whatever. Yes, absolutely. Or bringing in lots of low-paid wages from somewhere else. So obviously it's going to help the local community. What does this area of Greenland, what is the economy generally made up of?
Yeah, and this is a great point, a very important point for the Greenland government, of course, that they want to diversify the Greenland economy. Today, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's about half of the Greenland economy, which is a block grant from Denmark. And then a very important part, I'd say another 50% thereabout, is from fishing, income from fishing and export of fish or shrimps and other living resources. Tourism also plays an important role, and that's increasing today. So, but of course, fishing is a bit uncertain in the future. I mean, it goes up and down. So the mineral industry is a nice way to diversify the income, and perhaps in some time also decrease the dependence on the Danish block grant.
Is it wild fishing, or does it tend to be farms as well off the coast?
I'm not aware of any fish farms in Greenland. It's all wild fishing.
It's all just in the sea as we like it. Okay, so that point in terms of how they like it, the mining brings us on to this application submitted for EU strategic project status. So where are you along that path for a start, and how likely, if you're a betting man, are you going to be that you're going to be involved in this?
Right. So the EU decided on the Critical Raw Materials Act earlier this year. And one of the instruments to bring about more production, domestic production of the critical and strategic raw materials is appointing so-called strategic projects. So there was a call for strategic projects that came out in May with the closing date of August 22 this year. And there's a new cut date sometimes in the early year, I think. But anyway, so we submitted 2 applications. We had to submit 2 because we have kind of 2 parts of the project. There's the upstream, the Amitsoq mining project, and then there's the midstream, which is the production of graphite active anode material. So 2 projects, extraction and processing. And we just passed the completion tests not long ago, so now it's under consideration, of course. So there's been an announcement that they anticipate that strategic projects will be announced decided on and announced by March 2025. So it's been delayed a bit because there were just a lot more applications than they anticipated. And our chances, I would say they're very, very high. We took all the boxes in terms of the geographic positioning of our activities. Also, the graphite is a strategic raw material. And also, there are very few other potential producers of this very important raw material for the energy transition.
I wanted to ask you regarding, because I think in the RNS where you announced that you'd submitted the exploitation license, obviously, there was also mention that you would present Amitsoq at this EU business mission in Greenland at Nuuk. So how did you feel that went in front of this 14-nation collaboration? Did you feel it was well received?
So the business mission in Nuuk was attended by various EU bodies. There was the European Investment Bank, there was the DG GROW and other people that are quite high up in the EU system. Very well received. It's one of the, as I said, it's one of the few graphite projects coming on stream in the coming time. So potentially coming on stream. Yeah, so I think we got a lot of airtime, so to speak. I was able to present. I also had offstage meetings with the various players there. So that was definitely important.
Yeah. And how important was the fact that the project gained this project status from the Mineral Security Partnership? I mean, just talk us through the different statuses. Does it presumably start from concept, project through to production?
Yeah, well, that's not quite clear yet, actually, how that goes, because the Mineral Security Partnership is a relatively new invention, so to speak. So they're still developing this, the partnership, and also how to bring about the measures that need to be put in place to support these projects. But we have been speaking to the Mineral Security Partnership, participating in several meetings with them, presenting and discussions over the past 3/4 of a year, I would say. So now it's more like official that we are Mineral Security Partnership project, and that goes on over the coming time with yet other meetings. And I think that there is they just formed the Minvest body, which is going to coordinate private and public investments in the critical raw materials space. I think it's utterly important because what they like to see in Mineral Security Partnership is particularly diversifying the supply chain. It doesn't really matter where you're located as long as it feeds into the Western realms countries' supply of critical raw materials. So whether we are now our project, the extraction project is in Greenland, the first active anode materials plant will be Norway. That's all fine even from a US perspective, because it diversifies the supply chain.
So what made you go down the road then of not just mining? Because you've obviously now talked about GreenRoc going through the processing stage now as well with the stuff I read, the letter of intent for AAM plant. What does AAM stand for?
Active anode material.
Okay, I'm glad you knew that and not me. Okay.
So,
So you've said following a lengthy evaluation process, this company has selected a place now in Norway.
yeah.
So is there a reason why you didn't stay in Denmark?
Yes, several reasons. So, first of all, access to inexpensive energy.
Okay.
So, Norway has the least expensive energy in Europe, and also the energy with the lowest CO2 emission for the generation of the energy. In Denmark, sometimes there's also a lot of cheap energy, but it's because it's dominated by wind turbine generated power. There are times where the energy is not so inexpensive. It also comes with a much higher CO2 emission footprint. In Norway, most of the energy will be supplied by hydropower, which is a much more stable source of power.
Yeah, water flows and doesn't stop. So
yeah, and so another reason is that Norway is a great country for a location of a mineral processing plant. They have a long history of supporting those industries. And in fact, where we're locating ourselves in the neighborhood, within 50 kilometers, there are several, I would say a handful of very big mineral processing plants. So all the regulations are in place to handle such industries.
yeah, we've been dealing with one company, Metals One, which I was interested when you were saying you had black sands. That's the Tola deposit?
Yeah.
This is nickel, is it?
No, it's titanium.
Ah, okay. Titanium dioxide, as in rutile, or as in the other thing?
So it's sitting in a mineral called ilmenite. So
Ilmenite, yes.
It's a titanium iron oxide. So it has to be treated to produce, for instance, titanium dioxide, which is used as pigments and many other things. So unfortunately, it's not rutile.
Yeah, rutile is the best one, obviously, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is in Norway, is it? The Tula?
So the Tula Black Sands, the TBS project, is in northern Greenland.
Ah, okay. So it's in Greenland as well.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I suppose the word on everybody's lips is it sounds like a wonderful project. It looks like it works. I've looked at the finances here and we'll talk through them now. How are you going to pay for all this?
Yeah.
Because to get you have a resource and I mean the resource has been updated to a JORC status, has it?
Yeah.
And what amount of graphite do you have in JORC status?
So we have about 23 million tons at a bit more than 20% graphite. So really high graphite grades.
So that's about what, 4.5 million tons of contained graphite?
4.7 million tons of contained graphite, which is a lot more than we are going to produce in the 20-something year mine life that we initially. So, which is what the preliminary economic assessment for the mine is based on. 22-year mine life.
And how many tons per annum of the graphite then in those 22 years are you talking about?
80,000 tons of graphite concentrate per year.
Okay, so this is only 2 million tons over the 22 years, and you've got 4.7, yeah. So less than 50%. So does this mean that you could produce twice as much, or that the project would last longer, or is it just not feasible to produce that much?
Oh, it's definitely feasible. We felt that we needed to sit with a production that is, not complicated to handle. That in terms of like mine design and production rate. But it's certainly possible to ramp up the production or extend mine life or both. And now important is to realize that we haven't defined the full extent of the ore bodies here. So they're open to the north, to the south, and to down dip towards the west. So, and we have indications that it's probably a lot bigger than what we have drilled up to now. So it's definitely a minimum. And I should also add that in the surrounding around Nanortalik, there are several other indications or mineralizations and deposits of similarly high-grade graphite. They just haven't been developed at all. They've never been drilled. They're all under our license. So potentially, this could be a major graphite district that can supply a lot of the graphite that we need in our part of the world. And remember that Greenland, okay, it's somewhere up there in the North Atlantic, but it actually is very conveniently located midway between Northern Europe and Northeast America.
Yeah, no,
So
sure.
relatively short shipping distances. Sorry, I got a bit sidetracked there, but there's a lot of resource there. A mining rate of 400,000 tons a year, which is what we have designed, producing 80,000 tons of graphite concentrate, is a good start. It's a quite significant production rate. It can go up. It can be adjusted as we go, but of course with negotiations with the Greenland government.
So let's talk about the economics of the overall project, Stefan. So first of all, we're looking at what we saw in the end of 2023 when you announced the PEA confirms robust economics for the Amitsoq Graphite Project. So just talk us through those numbers, if you can.
Yeah, sure, of course. So first of all, there's a capex associated with building the mine, which is about 130 million US, which includes a 25% contingency. Now, the NPV, net present value after tax, at 8% discount rate is 179 million US, which is kind of the gross profit after everything has been paid over the 22-year mine life. And that is based on the prices set out by Fast Market, the long-term price estimates back in fall of 2023.
Okay, and the payback time period for that, for the capital of the startup of production, I see here is 4 years, which is pretty efficient. I mean, I presume that's give or take a year. So let's say between 3 and 5 years, depending on obviously the price of the graphite. But with an internal rate of return of 26.7%, the mining itself looks like, a good project. The issue here, though, is really what's happening worldwide and with China specifically, because the reality is that there isn't enough graphite in Europe anyway. And I mean, you can maybe tell us some figures about this, but there isn't enough. China's in total control. If we don't have our own production, we are stuffed. Is that fair?
That's very well precisely formulated.
Yeah. So how much of this market does China currently control? Because it seems to be in the last couple of years, they really have taken total control of the market.
That's correct. So just last year, the agreed numbers were that China was sitting on 2/3 of the world's production of graphite and 93% of production of graphite active anode material. That is what's incorporated in the batteries. Today, 2024, the 2/3 have gone up to 80%. 80% of the world's production is now taking place in China, and 98%, near 100% of the production of graphite active anode material. So there's really no other production in our part of the world. There's one small active anode materials plant being presently set up in Louisiana in the US, but that's going to be like minuscule production compared to the demands in the coming years.
So this is economic warfare now, and the world has actually realized while the Chinese have probably been doing this for the last 20 years, maybe 2 decades, but they had a long-term view, while as everybody in the West, because of our economic systems and our supposedly democratic systems, have been looking at it as a 3 to 4 year plan every single time. Is that fair, or am I just on the soapbox?
No, that's completely right. And also in our part of the world, we rely on the market to solve all the problems. But, it doesn't really work that way once you have geopolitics involved. So when you can weaponize the supply of strategic raw materials, then suddenly we're in a position where there needs to be taken some political decisions to make sure that these supplies are being brought to the market from our part of the world, which is also why we see there are things being done today. The IRA in the US has certainly helped. and we are also expecting to see some instruments put in place in Europe to support projects such as ours and others in the raw material space.
And this is why you said earlier you're very, very likely to be supported, because if you don't have this production, then Europe is going to be absolutely stuffed. But the interesting thing is, if I look at this, forget about the security just for 1 minute. This project doesn't get me excited, okay? Because we don't know how the graphite prices are going to go, et cetera, et cetera. But what does get me excited is when we then take this raw material, sell it to yourself, and process the stuff. Because now you're talking about an operating cost of, let's round it up to $2,000 per ton. Plus, I presume does that 2,000 include the cost of the purchase of the graphite from yourselves, or that's just the operating cost?
No, that's the operating cost.
Okay, so we have to add another $500 on top of that per ton. So let's suggest $700, as we talked about, $700 to $1,000. So again, let's play devil's advocate and say the whole thing costs $3,000 per ton. How much of that 39,700 annual production does that sell for in the European market, even today when graphite prices are low?
So today, depending on the quality, that is the level of purification and electrochemical capacity, it will be selling at between $5,500 and $7,500 per ton. And
okay.
So a very significant margin, which also results in a much higher after-tax NPV, which is about 620 million US.
I mean, you got 120 million of free cash flow there per annum. Now, obviously, you got to pay the initial 340 million to actually set the thing up, but 120 million dollar free cash flow plus what you make on the mining is not to be sniffed at. And do you not think you're overpriced at the minute in the market? Because your market cap is 3.3 million market cap. That seems a huge amount for something that's going to produce 120 to 140 million dollars a year.
Yeah, that's just the way the market sees us today. I don't think they really realize the kind of upside, of course, that is associated with this project. Also, with all the political support that we are seeing at the moment, that inevitably will result also in some kind of financial support to get us going. So I think we'll be in a completely different situation a few years from now when we are going to be one of the few companies that will deliver this very important critical raw materials to the Western world.
And just my last question before, I know Phil has got some questions before you go, but how much as a percentage or in millions or however you can describe it, are these grants likely to be? I mean, what magnitude have they been, or do we not know? They just haven't been awarded yet?
Yeah, well, I mean, some have been awarded. Telga, which is an Australian company developing a graphite project in Sweden, just received 70 million euros as a grant from the EU. It's a grant that we'll be applying for once we have been setting up a company in Norway. But it ranges from a few millions to several hundred millions. We can see that in the US, companies regularly are given loans and grants in the 100 million US range.
Yeah, I mean, if you have government lending at low rates even, it will make a massive difference to all of those economics as well, rather than having to use, obviously, the banks and everyone else who wants to make money. So, yes.
I was just touching on the feasibility study that, because obviously I wanted to talk about the high quality, and I think there was purity level mentioned was over like 99.5% as coated spherical purified graphite. So obviously that's suitable for an active anode material in these lithium ion batteries. But there was also mention of the potential, was it sodium hydroxide purification? Because obviously we've seen that hydrofluoric acid leaching is obviously detrimental to environmental issues and etc. So just talk us through, are you happy with those results that you got from that feasibility study for the purification levels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have some ongoing tests because one way is, of course, to use the standard Chinese technique. But that technology, purification technology, simply is a way to treat a large amount of graphite material with unknown origin. And because it's unknown origin, because it comes from very different deposits, also unknown impurities, we can tailor our purification process to just target the impurities that we know we have in our ore that comes with the various minerals that are associated with the ore. And therefore, we can reduce the amount of reagents, but we can also shift, maybe reduce to zero the use of hydrofluoric acid and completely shift to the use of sodium hydroxide, which is a lot milder agent.
Very good. And the last question, being you're on the Sunday roast, what is your favorite Sunday roast? I mean, presumably you come to the UK from now and then, being AIM listed. What is your favorite Sunday roast?
I've only had one Sunday roast ever in the UK.
Really?
So that's my favorite. It was
What was it?
Yeah,
so it was in Lyme Regis along with some friends a couple of years ago. It was a really nice roast with some roasted onions and mushroom sauce. I think it was. It was just absolutely wonderful.
It was beef, yeah.
It was beef. Sorry, yes, it was beef.
We have the choice between beef, lamb, chicken, and pork. So you get the choice between. All of them would be classed as an English roast dinner. So
a mixed. Well, you go the mixed, and you have 3 or 4 meats on your plate, which is perfect.
That's right. We'll have to meet you in London sometime and have a roast dinner with everything.
Absolutely.
All the
Okay,
trimmings.
but
let me know.
We know you push for time, so we'll say Stefan Bernstein, CEO of GreenRoc Materials. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Kevin. Pleasure to be with you.
Yes, thanks, Stefan.
So we're thrilled to welcome our second guest, Oliver Friesen, CEO of Guardian Metal Resources, who joins us to discuss their latest strategic move. Guardian Metal has recently entered a letter of intent to acquire the Tempiute Tungsten Mine and Mill project in Nevada, a former major tungsten producer. Oliver will share insights on this acquisition, Guardian's expansion plans, and the broader significance of tungsten in today's global market. So welcome back, Oliver.
Hey, how's it going, gents? Good to chat again.
Yeah, good. I mean, it sounds at first reading like a fantastic LOI for this acquisition. So just tell us, or tell the listeners, what initially brought the Tempiute Tungsten Mine to your attention, and kind of what made it stand out as a strategic opportunity for Guardian, and also walk us through the process of, securing this option with Hinkenite Resources, and what were some of the key factors you considered before moving forward?
Yeah, so just to answer your first question there, Phil, how did we sort of come about, or how did we identify this asset first? So, I've been what I consider to be in the trenches now in the tungsten space for really 3.5 years now, probably even going on 4. So I've been in lots of conversations about tungsten, obviously with third parties, with off-takers, with policymakers, with government, with other exploration companies, with downstream consumers. So I've really got to understand what is driving tungsten pricing. I understand the demand, I understand the supply, and really along that process, I've just become more and more bullish. And as a team, really, I should say, the Guardian Metal team and our board continues to become more and more bullish on tungsten. It's the key military metal right now. The U.S. has no domestic supply. North America has no domestic supply, and China obviously controls the supply chain of that metal. So, we've talked about this before, but as we continue to progress here. And here we are towards the end of 2024, and there's now speculation of an export ban out of China. So really just our thesis and our bullishness on tungsten continues to evolve and grow. And that really led us to start asking ourselves, well, what's next? Obviously, we have Pilot Mountain 100% owned. We're pushing that forward to the PFS and beyond. And one of the questions that we've gotten is, well, how much tungsten could you theoretically supply to the U.S. market? And it really got us thinking, because obviously Pilot Mountain, we have an idea as to what that quantum looks like, and it's significant. It's very material in the U.S. landscape. But what was put to us is sort of what's the home run strategy, or what could the home run strategy look like? Well, potentially we could look at how much we could produce annually to really replace the Chinese imports and some of the other imports from unfriendly adversaries. So that just got us thinking. We had some strategy sessions about what this company could look like a year, 2 years from now. And obviously, we've had a decent run since our IPO a year and a half ago. But looking forward, how do we really, really grow and scale this business was the question. How do we scale? So that then turned our attention to, okay, are there any sort of other assets in Nevada or in North America that could complement and be accretive to what we're doing? And that's the key word here, is accretive to what we're doing at Pilot Mountain. Now, we have a lot of really good relationships within the tungsten space now, whether that's through government, through off-takers, through downstream consumers. So naturally, if we bring on more tungsten assets, a lot of the benefits of those relationships we can sort of apply to any new acquisitions in the tungsten space, and specifically any of those acquisitions that are within the state of Nevada, because that's where we're operating right now. So it's been kind of a 6 to 9 month process here, understanding the strategy. How do we get to where we want to go, which is much bigger offering than what we are now. You know, we have grand ambitions here as a company. As a CEO, we're not just kind of happy with a small market cap, just kind of chugging along. We want to really grow this and scale this business. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying we started looking at other assets in North America. This one really checked all of our boxes. In terms of proximity, in terms of existing infrastructure, in terms of the patented claims, in terms of the existing historical resource, the tailings potential, the high-grade stockpile. So it was sort of check, and obviously being relatively close to Pilot, so we can operate quite efficiently, and there's certainly synergies going forward. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer there, Phil, but I think it's important to understand where we're coming from, how this decision kind of came to be, and then where we go from here now with this asset alongside Pilot Mountain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I saw one of your X posts where you did like a walk around video showing where the mill was, and in relation to sort of Pilot Mountain in the distance, you talked about area, was it for area 41 or whatever it is?
51, yeah.
51, yeah. So in the distance, and talked about F-35s buzzing people, you know, people who've been to the previous site. So just looking at the deal itself, I mean, it looks like there's, you know, an initial deposit of $5,000 to Hinchinite Resources within 3 business days. And then there's a due diligence period of 90 days where you can conduct your usual, you know, due diligence on the Tempiute project. So presumably that will include looking at the historical tailings there and doing sort of assay and test work on there, just to see whether that could potentially be processed, right?
Yeah, of course. So there's lots of things we're looking at. I mean, the due diligence has been ongoing really since I left site 2 weeks ago. So that's when I did all the sampling. So I think we collected about 16 or 17 samples. Those are in the lab for rush analysis. But yes, we're looking at everything, right? So to make a final investment decision here for a definitive, we need to look at everything and then make a final decision as a board. So yes, the deposit has been paid. That covers us for a 90-day due diligence period. We're looking at obviously the title opinion to make sure the chain custody is all clear on those patented claims. But yeah, more importantly, we're looking at the technical bits, which is, okay, historical resource. We're looking at the existing tailings. You know, what does that look like? I think I did put out a tweet today, or an X today post of myself digging through the upper calcrete layer of the tailings to get a sample of that material, because it's never been tested before. And then I've sampled all of the high grade stockpiles that surface there across the property. So there's lots of things we look at with this due diligence period. But just to really, I think, make something, you know, very clear here about how this deal was structured. You know, it's structured in a way that the vendor, you know, there's success as we have success. That's really key here. And you know, that's how we wanted to structure this deal. We wanted to be aligned with the vendor. And you know, he believes in, and his group believes in the project. So they were happy to put together agreement that sort of reflects that. So as we have success, as we, you know, really start to unlock and show the value of this asset, then, you know, him and his group have success too. So we're fully aligned in that matter. They're a great group to work with. So we're looking forward to getting the DD done and then making a final decision, which at this stage, I certainly believe and hope will be positive, and then we'll move forward and with the option agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at that. It certainly looks good. The fact that, you know, you'll grant Hinchinite this 1.5% net smelter royalty effectively on all production, with the right to then buy back the 50% of the NSR royalty for us. I think it's $1 million either in cash or Guardian shares, which will reduce the royalty to 0.75%. So it looks like a good deal. So, I mean, in terms of moving things forward, like the mill and the site there, presumably there's crushing and milling equipment within that can be sort of put back into, you know, recommissioned. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember that this was blasted off in production in the late 1980s. So things have certainly moved on in terms of technology. There's some old equipment there. Some of it has been removed as well, but really the value I would say there in the existing infrastructure is, and it sounds kind of crazy, but the concrete slab, just to have a large concrete slab that you could kind of repurpose and use for future milling operations, that's a huge cost saving. The actual external facilities and building are in good shape, so they'll, bit of modification and upgrades. But really, I'd say the main value is in the existing underground infrastructure. Millions and millions and millions of dollars of tunneling and underground work has been done there. That's how they were operating, and there's some open pit infrastructure as well. But the power infrastructure as well is massive. Just to have literally a substation on site on the mill sites that you can just turn the switch on. Literally is effectively the process here, because it's still maintained by the county, because it's the substation that supplies power to the nearby town. So that's just a huge cost saving and time saving mechanism just right there alone. So the infrastructure, we're really happy that it exists. The existing tailings dam, but obviously the real prize here is what's in the ground still that needs to be mined, and that's the historical tungsten resource. That's really what we're looking at here and what we're most excited about. But those are all bonuses, right? And these are all things that increase the attractiveness and the potential future valuation of an asset like this.
So Oliver, tell us a little bit about the history of this mine, and are the guys who are operating this mine, are they second generation now, or are they still the guys who were operating it in late 80s?
No, so the group that we're purchasing this from, they haven't operated this mine. They acquired it a few years ago, and we've since now come to acquire it off them. But I mean, historically, and what we'll do is we'll put out further, either on Twitter or through an RNS, just outlining what the historical kind of last 100 years have looked like. Importantly, this was a significant tungsten producer in the 1980s by Union Carbide. So Union Carbide was a tungsten exploration development company and mining company. They had a few operations active in North America, and this was one of them. This is one of their flagship ones. So that was the most recent kind of activity, like significant activity on the project. But like I said, we'll announce more about the history of this project, but it's been in operation or been operated on multiple times throughout kind of the last between the 1900s to 1980s. And really what's interesting is a lot of groups were looking at different metals. So it's not like this has just been a tungsten project. There's obviously tungsten is the critical commodity here, but there's history of groups being in here. This is, we're talking the 20s and 30s and 40s where things were a lot less sophisticated, but looking at other metals and mining, silver is one of them that came up, zinc as well, copper. So there's a lot of other kind of polymetallic metals here that have been a focus by previous operators in the early 19th century. So that just really highlights that there's a lot of potential here to have a group come in and really tie it all together. Look at the tungsten along with everything else. And that's what we're looking to do here, is tie it all together and really start to realize and push forward the potential value of a really, really strategic and important asset like this.
So geologically, the tungsten is in skarn deposits, or you don't know at this stage?
No, yeah, so it's a skarn, so similar to our Pilot Mountain project. So we understand the geology well, but it's a polymetallic skarn. So it's not like it's just tungsten. I mean, I was on site. There were, blocks of effectively massive chalcopyrite, which is a copper mineral. There's a lot of sphalerite. There's other kind of metals and minerals that I saw at surface there. So it's polymetallic, but yes, it is a skarn. So in terms of polymetallic, what metals are all there? There's like I mentioned, silver, zinc, copper. There's some other historical mentions of other really critical and important metals as well. So we need to obviously do the assays to confirm that, but that's what we're doing now. So what we should know in a couple of weeks here, what at least the initial samples look like, which will tell us and give us an indication as to what the potential could look like in terms of some of these other metals that exist on that property.
So as we know in the geology space, every day is school day. So does that mean that the skarns have come from porphyry in some situation?
You've been doing your homework, Kevin. Yes, that's exactly right. And once again, we look at these properties with a lens that maybe other groups don't look at, which is, what's the exploration potential? Not just what is the actual potential of what's kind of in the ground right now, but there's always a bigger picture to be seen. So, we've already looked at some historical reports that mention the causative porphyries. I've gone and looked at those porphyry rocks myself. No one has really gone and looked for the causative porphyry, which is what we're doing at Pilot Mountain. So there's another kind of value lever that we can pull there in terms of looking for the causative porphyry, which more often than not is where the bigger prize can be found in these type of systems. So that's another thing that we're looking very closely at.
So if we take each part of this deal one by one, you have ore on surface to a certain level. Obviously, I think when any mine, when it's operating during the 80s, when it finished, will have had to have ore ready for processing, and when it closes, obviously that's finished. So you have an amount of ore already there. So some of the assays are on that ore, I presume.
Yeah, so just to be careful, we shouldn't say ore. It's high grade stockpiles. Yeah, ore is just a
high
word
grade
that you
stockpile.
but yes, you're correct there, Kev. So there's multiple. There's actually 6 in total high grade stockpiles. And effectively what was happening in the 80s was they were mining from this project, and they were kind of moving everything downhill towards the central mill site, or where they processed and extracted all the metals. But in the 1980s, they didn't really have the technology to process high sulfide material. And so what that means is that anything that was high sulfide, they just kind of put on the side and said, okay, well, we can't process this stuff, so we'll leave it here. Really interestingly enough is the fact that high sulfide material is where you get typically your highest grades in a skarn system. Now, I just want to refer you back to the most recent Pilot Mountain drilling results, RNS, and that really outstanding interval of just under 40 meters of greater than 1% WO3 equivalent. That was really driven by a lot of greater than 1% WO3 intervals, which were high sulfide intervals. I've seen those intervals myself. We're talking about semi-massive to massive sulfide. So that's really at Pilot Mountain where the highest grades are found. So obviously we need to go do the sampling, which we've done at Tempiute, but to see firsthand the visuals of some of this really high grade sulfide material and sulfide-rich material, I'm certainly hopeful and confident that a lot of that material will be very high grade, and that's sort of sitting at surface. That's already
It's
been
almost better than drilling in that respect, isn't it? That it's actually all out on the surface.
Yeah, I mean it's a great leg up to have, right? I mean the previous operator extracted that material, they spent the money to pull it out, but didn't have the technology. And just to be clear, the technology now is well advanced, and producing metals from high grade and high sulfide material is very easily done now. So the technology is well advanced, so we could theoretically take that material and process it no problem.
And regarding the waste pile, the waste site that you have, you said 300 meters by 300 meters, which is pretty big, especially when it was, I think, 12 to 15 meters thick. Do you anticipate that the people who, or not anticipate, because I presume there must be some evidence of this, that they were basically just taking the tungsten out and leaving everything else there? Is that what was happening when it was in production?
Yeah. So as you mentioned there, Kev, it's a pretty significant footprint. So I've been there myself. I've sampled it. Anyone can go to their photos or pull up Google Maps, and they can go and measure it themselves. You'll see the tailings there, kind of just about a kilometer and a half from the mill that's on site there. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Kev. So once again, the technology to recover metals and to process metals has changed. The historical production records that I've seen reference zinc, and they reference tungsten as well. Obviously, tungsten being the main metal of focus there. But I mentioned there's a lot of other metals that have been referred to historically, and I've seen with my own 2 eyes some other minerals, including chalcopyrite, as I mentioned. And there's no production records showing recovery of copper or silver. Even gallium was mentioned a few times in historical reports. So, there's potential for what's another metal that's been, had an export ban out of China come into an effect. So that's why we've done this assay. No one's done it. We were doing multi-element. So we're doing not just your normal sweep, but also all your rare earths as well, just to understand. And that's part of this DD, is to really understand what other metals are there. We know the tungsten is there, but obviously, as we found out at Pilot Mountain, the silver, the copper, the zinc are really important as well. And especially when it comes to future economics. So trying to understand the full picture here. And like I said, no one has really gone in to understand what that full picture looks like. So it'll be a really exciting DD period. And once again, if successful, which we are confident it will be, then we'll move through the option and really start to unlock some value here.
It seems to be that the people who own this property already are obviously quite keen to jump on Guardian Metal Resources bandwagon as well, in terms of that they are obviously going to get some sort of call option themselves to Pilot Mountain and to Garfield and the other assets that you have. Has that been a positive in your negotiation?
Absolutely. So I went and spent some time with the vendor group when I was in Nevada 2 weeks ago, and that was a big part of the conversation. Was, well, what do we offer? What does Guardian Metal offer? I mean, there's any other company with no experience in tungsten could come in and say, we really want this asset, but what advantages can they really offer if they haven't spent and done the hard yards understanding tungsten and forging relationships? So we've done that. We have an LOI with GTP. We've talked about the work we've done to obtain non-dilutive government grant funding. So all of these relationships, all this work we've done, the conversations we've had, that was the pitch: is, hey, we can look to leverage some of these relationships to really advance and to really unlock value at Tempiute. And they were really excited by that opportunity for us to come in and take a lot of the good work we've done and apply it to a great asset like this. So yeah, it's a very mutually beneficial agreement. They take part in the success as we have success, but also there's a lot of things that we believe we can do with this asset that a company who doesn't understand tungsten like we do could do with something like this.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to ask you. I mean, with Tempiute being sort of so close to the flagship Pilot Mountain, well, close in Nevada terms, I'm guessing. How do you see these two assets really complementing each other within the portfolio itself? I mean, presumably you could truck product from one to the other if there was a processing facility on one of the sites. I mean, probably too early to comment in terms of what the grand plans are, but what do you potentially see happening there?
Yeah, no, it is a bit early, Bill, but I think it is good to start to understand what the potential synergies could be. So just the first one that's really obvious is we have crews operational at Pilot Mountain right now. So we have drilling crews, we have geological crews, we have engineering crews. To drive, just under 3 hours to another site is, as a geologist or an engineer, is nothing. That's sort of right next door. So there's obvious synergies there. Being able to utilize existing crews. We don't need to go and hire a whole new crew to operate a project in a different state or a different country. So that's a huge just cost saving and just efficiency saving mechanism right there. But more importantly, what are the kind of the bigger economic potential synergies down the line? So you mentioned a central processing facility. That's possible. I would say probably trucking just normal materials probably wouldn't be economic, but there's the garnet that we're looking at. So if you were able to upgrade the rock via kind of garnet extraction, or there's ore sorting mechanisms that are often applied to tungsten projects. So potentially an upgraded material could be trucked to a central facility. So those are kind of the bigger picture questions that we're asking ourselves now. It's a bit early stage, as you mentioned, but we're having these conversations, and we're starting to talk about what this could look like. Because as we continue to move through the DD and then ideally through the definitive, these are the questions that will be asked of us from some of these parties and groups that we know in the tungsten spaces. How could these two potentially fit together and be part of a bigger solution for the U.S. tungsten landscape?
Yeah, and obviously, if the due diligence goes as expected, what's sort of the timeline for the next steps, and when can listeners and investors expect to hear more updates on this acquisition?
Well, I think listeners will probably know that we don't move slowly. We're not a group that kind of just sits on our hands and waits for things to come to us. So, if the DD is positive, which once again we believe it will be, and we move to the definitive agreement, we'll be active pretty much on day one. What does that look like out of the gates? So, it's a historical data comp exercise. We're working on that now, trying to take in all the data that currently exists. And then once we have all that, it'll be, understanding the potential volume that exists within the high grade stockpiles at the tailings. That's kind of low cost exploration that can be done. Doing kind of auger drilling within a grid system across the tailings. If the samples show that there's existing metals there, well, how many tons are there and what's the actual resource? What could that look like? And then obviously, confirming the historical resource. That's the main thing. And there's a lot of historical drilling logs that we can utilize. We need to get our hands on more of those, and they exist through various contacts and within our network in Nevada, trying to track all that down. But that's a low cost way typically to get a lot of historical data that you can very easily verify and then bring that up to speed and up to the kind of the current standards. So There's a lot of things we want to do there. A lot of them will be kind of low cost out of the gate, reflecting kind of our initial obligations under the earn-in. But then as we continue to kind of gain support here for this project for Pilot Mountain, we can look to really start to unlock value here. That's through drilling, through the development steps that we're currently taking at Pilot Mountain. So that's kind of longer term, more work to be done, but that's maybe what the roadmap could look like.
So, Oliver, the first time, my first read of this, when I read the RNS in detail, was, oh, how's this going to affect Pilot Mountain? How's this going to affect Garfield? Is this going to take your focus away? And then I sort of spoke to you briefly, or messaged you briefly, and it seems to me that you've got a much bigger vision of Guardian Metal Resources than maybe we have as shareholders. So do you wanna paint the picture for us?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a few people did message me the same thing, which is is this a distraction? And the way I answer that is, if we were still a 10 million pound company that had just IPO'd, just trying to get our bearings, didn't have the team in country, didn't have the advisory team that supports us, I would say, yeah, you know what, it's probably a bit of a distraction, and really we need to focus on the task at hand. The landscape and the trajectory of GMET has changed a lot, and we're a bigger company now. We have some really supportive and large backers financially. We've built a fantastic operations, engineering, geological team in Nevada, in Reno. So what that means is that it's not a distraction. This is accretive. This is us looking at what we need to do to grow this company considerably. That's really the question that we're asking behind the scenes, which is, okay, we're at a certain market cap now. How do we get to that next level? And this is what we need to be doing, is looking at accretive. I keep on saying that word, but it's so important. This is an accretive acquisition of another very substantial tungsten exploration development and former mine, not too far down the road from Pilot Mountain. So we're looking to really grow this business, and this is an important step along that pathway. When it comes to Garfield, when it comes to Golconda, brilliant assets that currently sit in the portfolio. A lot of the feedback we've gotten during kind of the outreach we've been doing into the US and into North America from institutions and bankers is, this tungsten story is fantastic. Like, you need to go all in on tungsten. Like, that's what institutions want you to do. They want you to take a bet and go for it, right? They don't want you to go, oh, well, maybe, just in case this doesn't work out. No, 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 no. If you have a bet, if you have a thesis about a metal, go for it. And we are a first mover in the tungsten space in the US, and that has afforded us the opportunity to take on Tempiute. Now, I'm not saying we're just neglecting the other assets. They're really, really good assets. And what I can assure listeners of is anything we do with Garfield, Golconda, the other assets, they will remain as a shareholder of Guardian exposed to the upside of that asset. Whether they're footing the bill or not, we're not going to just park them and do nothing. We're going to look, and what we've talked about, the interest from third parties, is we are going to ensure that our investors remain exposed to the upside of these projects, regardless if we're doing it ourselves or someone else is doing it. There's a lot of interest in copper porphyry targets. There's a lot of interest in gold targets. Certainly there's lower cost exploration that we can be doing on both of those to continue to advance them. So we don't have I can't give you a definitive answer as to how Garfield and Golconda, probably the two most important ones aside from Pilot, fit in right now. We are having those conversations, but I can ensure listeners they will remain exposed to the upside of those projects regardless of what we do. And that's my promise.
Yeah. So, Oliver, when you talk about magnitude, and obviously you never want me to ask questions about money, but when you talk about magnitude of size of company, I remember when we first talked and you were 7, 8 million market cap, and you were talking about, yes, we want to be tenfold this size. Is that still the equation? Whether you're 30 million, 35 million, 25 million market cap, is this, in our colloquial UK terms, is this a 10 bagger from here if all of the things fall into place? And I know you can't answer it, but try your best.
Well, yeah, you know what I'm going to do here, Kip. I'm going to dance around this question, but what I can say, just to give investors and listeners a bit of a flavor, is we don't do this for a 20% gain. Like, it's just not worth the stress. It's not worth the energy. It's not worth the what we put ourselves under as a management team just for, let's just grow this thing to 20% and we'll just kind of coast. Especially as a young guy myself, I'm 34. I'm really looking to make a name for myself. So, what that actual number looks like, I have some ideas, but I can assure listeners and my investors that we want to grow this business considerably. Now, things happen, and I can't just sit here and guarantee that's going to happen, but I'm doing my darnest, and we as a management team, to do all the things that we think we need to do to get to that goal. And that's what our investors are looking for us to do. They're looking for us to take a bet and look to really have a big win here. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're putting the people, the properties in place. We're doing the hard yards. Like I said, I don't get out of bed in the morning to say, let's just grow this business a little bit and then I'll go to bed. No, we want to grow this thing considerably. And Tempiute acquisition is one important step along that trajectory and that pathway to what our ultimate goal here is.
Okay, well, no answer. I mean, the scenario is in the tungsten space here. It's obviously an element that is required in the US for defense and probably other things as well that we can go into in more detail. But the scenario is hopefully we're going to get some sort of government grant decision in the next few months for Pilot Mountain. You have drilled, from what I've seen on Telegram now, 31 holes, I think it is. We've announced 12 or 13. So are we still looking at, in the next sort of 2 to 3 months, we're going to have a lot of news in terms of what is coming out? I mean, I don't actually think that people got the point that hole 12 was not expected to produce really any results, or it wasn't part of the original Pilot Mountain indicated resource. So, does that mean that the Pilot Mountain resource, really could be significantly bigger than you even anticipated?
Yeah, so just to answer your first question there, Kev. So yes, it's going to be very busy. We've always been very busy. Once again, this is sort of aligns with what I said previously, which is, we have grand ambitions here. So we're not, putting out a press release once every quarter and kind of just collecting a check. No. We want to grow this business. So yeah, it's going to be super busy. The drilling is ongoing at Pilot as we speak. There's a lot of macro things that are being discussed. There's a tungsten conference next week in Spain. There's speculation of an export ban of tungsten out of China. We'll see if that happens. Either way, the onshoring efforts here in the U.S. and regardless of the administration that gets in next week is a bipartisan issue. So yeah, it's going to be super busy. There's really no days off here at Guardian Metal. I can assure you of that. Drilling, Tempiute, potential macro events, as you mentioned. We've talked extensively about government grant endeavors that we have. I can't comment any more than that, but we've been working very hard behind the scenes on that. So yeah, it's a super busy period, and we're gonna finish strong into 2024, and I think 2025, if we do what I believe we can do, will be absolutely transformational for the business. So it's gonna be a really exciting time going forward here.
Yeah, and comment on this, but I just see that you're going to get to a point where you have effectively said, okay, there's this much tungsten, there's this much silver, there's this much garnet, there's this much copper, and someone's going to come along and say, here's a big check. Don't need to say anything.
Don't comment on that one, Oliver. On that note, we'll say Oliver Friesen, CEO of Guardian Metals, thanks very much for appearing on the podcast again.
Yeah, thanks so much, James. Let's chat again soon.
Okay, so let's have a look at some of the movers and shakers of this week. The best move of 5 days return is Microsalt. They're up some 95%. News and follow on B2B customer orders, which obviously impressed the market. ONDO InsurTech up some 70% as well, so it's good to see them moving. They had announcement that the factory capacity had increased, obviously in anticipation of US demand, so that's always good to see them moving. Emerson, we talked a little bit about Emerson last week. There was this dispute with the Moroccan government and this ESIA process. And it looks like there's been so a little bit of positive movement on there. They've engaged Bowles Schiller Flexner as the litigation counsel, and they're examining various funding avenues for an investment dispute going forward. So it looks like they're preparing to kind of fight with the Moroccan government on that one, and that one's bounced back some 55%. Alchemy Capital Investments up about 43%. There was talk about 25 million of convertible bond financing through ABG Sundal Collier. So again, it's that one's moved very well. Orcadian Energy, we talked about quite a few of these companies within the oil and gas sector on this windfall announcement on the budget. They've responded very well. They've been up 30%. Okay, another one within the energy sector that's done extremely well last week has been Energy Pathways. Obviously, we've had Ben Klube on in the past, but again, the announcement within the budget related to investment within green hydrogen projects really moved them on the Wednesday afternoon after the budget. They peaked at around 11.5 pence. They've dropped back on Friday to around the 10.5 pence mark, but they're up some 30% on the week. And if you look back from a historical point of view from the last, 6 weeks, they've really moved from around the 1.5 pence mark up to 11.5 pence, which is it's effectively 10x on the investment within the last 6 weeks. So a phenomenal mover of late, and really good to see one that's that we've talked about in the past, doing extremely well on the back of obviously the very good loan, favourable terms on the loan that they get negotiated, and also the fact that they've been involved with this DESNES. So what are your thoughts on EPP's rise from the doldrums back up to all-time highs around the 11.5 pence mark, Kev?
Yeah, it's been a pretty historic rise, but at the same time, it's by no means overvalued. So I think it's worth around sort of the 15, 16, 17 million pounds at this juncture. Well, based on the fact that there is hundreds of millions of pounds of revenue we're talking about here in terms of the overall, both from the storage and also from the point of view of the gas that they will get out of the ground, then I think it's probably still got quite a way to go, to be honest. Now, obviously, I think there needs to be more news now, and it's obviously settling in around the price that it's at. But we fully expect there'll be more news, and we'll be in touch with Ben as soon as there is. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Another one that's moved is Firing Strategic. They're up some 26% as well on the week. So it's good to finally see them moving up on the quicklime project down in Zambia. Anything else that's piqued your interest, Kev, this week? We saw an announcement, didn't we, on Friday? In fact, we talked last week to Rick, didn't we, Kev? And we had a really good chat with him, and we had a few comments on the podcast. Some of them less positive than others. Let's say that the first one I want to read was. Is from a guy called Richard Spence. Please shut up when Rick Rule is making a point. You just show ignorance. Now, I'm not sure which one of the members, whether that's aimed at Charles. I can't imagine it because he's pretty good at waiting for pauses. I'm pretty usually good at having my mic muted, so I can only think that this one is aimed at you, Kev.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was one of the negative ones, but one of the ones that I want to read out is from a gentleman called David Riley. He says, "Thank you again for the great interview and info. You folks are obviously well informed. I'm intrigued by some." I don't know who's talking to on that well informed bit, because I don't know.
Well, that's obviously me as well.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe myself. I'm intrigued by some of the stocks mentioned: Bazant, African Pioneer, Extract, and Galileo. Being in the US, I'm not familiar with these names and having some difficulty finding out more. Have you looked thoroughly into them and are invested in them, or are they just possibilities? Are you interested in anything else similar? Thank you in advance. Great content, by the way. So I guess to you, Kev, he's obviously intrigued by these stocks, Bazant, African Pine Extra, and Galileo. Do you want to just give him a sort of 1-minute resume on them? I know Bazant had some news late on Friday, didn't they, that was announced to market regarding the reviewing of the gold mineralization at the Hope and Gora project, but maybe you can just add a little bit of color on each one.
Yeah, well, firstly, Bazant has a few assets, but let's just focus on Namibia for now. Hope and Gora is a copper asset in Namibia, close to Swakopmund. It has a resource already on it, 190,000 tons of contained copper, and the mining license, 25-year Namibian mining license, has just been granted. So that's going to mean that it can start to move in terms of what it will be doing. There is processing nearby, And now that they're announcing, there's obviously some gold credit in terms of that as well. So if you're going to enhance that project, probably the first place you're going to go is where the gold is and the copper. So that's certainly very interesting.
Yeah, and just to add on that, Kev, on the announcement they made, there was a typical gold credit of 0.4 grams per ton of gold, contributing around $35 per ton at current gold prices. Bazant sees potential for gold to significantly offset mining and processing costs. Highlights include confirmatory drilling in high gold areas, historic gold intercepts, and peak grades like 5.89 grams per ton of gold over 1.76 meters at Vendome. And obviously, Colin noted the value of an early cash flow opportunities through optimal pit design. So the gold is really becoming, let's say, a way that they can offset the mining and processing costs at the Hope and Gora project.
Yeah, and having visited the site, we can say clearly that it's there. We saw the copper on the ground. I think I bought a chunk of copper back. Obviously, not copper, the ore with the copper in it, or the rock with the copper in it. So that would be Bazant in very short form. And there are many podcasts there, so go and listen to a podcast if you want more. Then we go to African Pioneer. The reason why I stick with African Pioneer, because it's also associated with that Hope and Gora project. They have a project called Ombongo, where they have a mining license also in Namibia, copper. It has a resource as well, and subsequently a railway line straight to the Hope and Gora project. So that will be very interesting also. And then we move on to Extract, which for a long time had a big project, a copper porphyry project in Australia with 1.3 million tons of contained copper. That needs higher copper prices to work. And that's one of the reasons why the share price has actually collapsed, because a lot of people thought that was going to be a real winner. When copper prices go up, it will be a real winner, I think, is my view on it.
Yeah.
They're also funded then by the sale of Manica project that they had in Mozambique. And that is being paid out on a quarterly basis now back into Extract Resources. And Extract Resources now have taken several licenses in Zambia, one of them being one of the ones we mentioned on the podcast last week in northwest Zambia. And also they have another one called Silver King, which we visited, I think, earlier in the year as well when we were in Zambia. So yes, that has a lot of potential exploration upside. And then we've got Galileo Resources, which also in Zambia as well as other places. But the main asset they have is in Luansobi, which is not far from Mufulira in Zambia. It has a resource on it. It has a mining license now, and it probably is going to move forward, I think, as a small open pit initially. Again, copper gold, and also has Shinganda, which also has some serious gold recording on it, as well as the copper. I mean, if you remember when we held those bars of rock that drilled up, they were a bit heavy because there was just nothing but copper in them.
Those massive sulfides, were they? They were like 35 to 40% rock in there, of actual copper.
It was copper, yeah. And Galileo has a lot of other resource as well in different parts. I think some in Botswana, some in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a general overview of them. Do we hold the stocks? Yes. Are they worth looking at probably all-time lows for pretty much all of them? That's your choice, obviously, but this is where we're at, I think.
Another comment, Kev, on there, I love this one, is great interview. Rick Rule is so generous with the time he gives to others. He's a top bloke. Kevin, your voice is younger than your face. Always took you to be a 20-something. Good to see the faces, though, because when you do audio only, it paints the picture.
Yeah.
That's a good
one.
So
he thinks I'm in my 20s? Good lad.
I think it's that high squeaky every now and then you put on.
I don't know whether that's a compliment or not. He thinks I'm totally inexperienced and therefore I'm in my 20s, or I'm actually a 56-year-old adult. I'm not sure. Absolutely, not that a 20-something isn't an adult, by the way, but yes, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, anything else in the week that's moved? Is there been any big movers or big news items to market that we've seen?
No, not really. Tell us a little bit about your trip. I know we did a thing last week, but you didn't personally say anything about your trip to Saladon. Tell us just a little bit about
Yeah, I
that,
mean,
and we'll finish on
Celadon
that maybe.
Celadon was excellent. Obviously, I was greeted by Jim. And then we had a chat and a coffee together about how things have been going, more of just a personal chat. And then effectively, he took me through to there's three phases initially. Phase one is the small part that currently where they're doing the clippings and the growing in these amazing rooms. And if you watched the Rick Rule podcast last week, there are some videos and some pictures from the site visit as well. So any Celadon investors, I do encourage you to go back and watch the YouTube video with all that information on it. I had a good chat, about 10 minutes with him, and I asked him about the various aspects. But so we walked around the facility, and I got gowned up, and I've never done that before, where you go into the full suit with your hazmat on and all your gloves, and you sprayed down your eyepiece. Literally, my phone was taken, it was disinfected, and yeah, and then we went into this area, because you've got the GMP side of things, which is the good manufacturing practice, which is all pharmaceutical grade. So you go from one room where you're going to effectively disinfect and it's distinguished by like a red border or the red floor of the room to differentiate between normal manufacturing and into this kind of pharmaceutical grade manufacturing where everything has to be sterilized. All the filtration systems are extremely high grade. It takes away any of the germs and everything and microbes. So went into the growing facility, phenomenal, clean, perfect. You smell the bud and everything. You can see all the different strains and the hydroponic systems in there and the way that they simulate the sun rising and the sun setting and the wind conditions. And so they're growing like grade of bud and flower that is literally pharmaceutical grade. And then we moved on to the phase two, which is the new facility or the expanded facility, which they're in the process of building and fitting out. That was phenomenal. I mean, literally taking phase one and doing it probably 10x in terms of size, in terms of revenues and everything like that. So that was really, really interesting to see. And then he showed me effectively phase three, which would be the next step, which would be probably an X a multiplier out on phase two. And I had a really good chat. He showed me the LVL, this nebulizer machine and again, that was on the video where you put the flower into this kind of cartridge, you insert it into this device, and then this is the trial they're doing with the NHS where there's about 500 participants in there. They're going to expand it out. But basically, pain relief is the first trials with the NHS and this LVL. But they're also developing IP to target other ailments like women's problems like pain within women like endometriosis. So that was fascinating. Yeah. So all in all, blown away by the facility, an amazing company. How the market cap is where it is right now is mind blowing because ultimately the facility alone, if they were going to go into it and fit out a facility, you'd be talking tens of millions of pounds. And, the market cap is what, sub 20 million? It's about 19 million pounds at around the 27. So for me, massively undervalued company from what I can see from just that facility.
Very good. Yeah, I was there last summer, and it is quite a facility. Not this summer, just gone the summer before, and yeah, yes, progress is being made. It's not as fast as obviously they'd hoped for, but let's see. The other one that I was looking at, which was relevant, I think, to the budget, was BSF Enterprise and the lab grown meat, but also the leather side of things. That was something that they had said, I think, in the budget and in government announcements that they were going to try and forge ahead with this in the UK. That this was something that we're going to do, which would be pretty dramatic for BSF Enterprises and their City Mix product and the leather and the cornea as well as the lab grown meat. So that's one company to look at. 3.3 million market cap for something with this much IP seems bizarre, really. It was in the 20s, wasn't it? How long ago? Less than a year ago. So yeah.
And
It's
I think the near
making
term
moves.
one, the near term one there is not near term, but it is the interesting one for me is the leather side of things, the skin and leather. As we've said it before, we've had Shay on that it looks like leather, it feels like leather, it smells like leather, because it is leather. That was the classic one he said. And genuinely, I think that um, if they can work together with some of these design houses, obviously, as they've announced to market, then and whatever how they can move that project forward or that product forward, then that would be a really, really big fillip for the company. So yeah, definitely one interesting.
So Phil, we had two very interesting guests, two resource plays today, in GreenRoc and in Guardian Metal Resources. Just give us a quick overview of what your thoughts are on both of them, and then we'll wrap it up.
One of my thoughts, well, I mean, yeah, very interesting. And Stefan, I'd never really, well, one, I'd never spoken to him before, so I didn't really get, I've never really had a chance to kind of delve into the details of GreenRoc. It's always a company that has kind of piqued my interest. So to actually sit down with him and go through some of the numbers and understand the project there at Amitsoq, I really like it. I think that the valuation, how it's got a valuation of around 4 million or what, 3.7 million market cap right now, with a project or with a resource that they've got a resource on it, they've got the pre-feasibility study, or they've got a design study on there, with effectively a resource estimate. They've got NAVs on there. They've got NPVs. They've got IRRs from both the mining assets, or the actual the mine, and they've also got the processing facility that we talked about with him. So there's two aspects of the company, isn't there? There's the mining, and then there's the processing facility. So it really impressed me with the fact that they've done so many numbers on it. The grant side of things is very interesting. Obviously, that they put it forward to the EU, effectively a nuke. Very interesting to hear him talking about that the presentation he did, and I think it's a company that's got real legs. Yeah, one that added to the radar for sure. Guardian, the latest announcement. Again, a lot of people would have sent you messages and me messages saying, is this just a distraction? But I think Oliver answered that very well. I think it's a bit part of his bigger plan, adding new assets all the time. I think with the proximity to Pilot Mountain, this new project has the possibility to complement Pilot Mountain. And as he said, maybe they could design different projects around, or one project around another, a bit like Telfer and Havieron type, system that they've got at Greatland. But ultimately, I'm impressed with both companies. What about yourself?
I don't think there's much else to add, really. I think they've both got, very big potential, I think. And I think we've got to change our mindset with Guardian Metal, because I think the management have changed their mindset now that it's a much bigger game and a much bigger operation than we had when it came to market 18 months ago. It's now, becoming a fully fledged exploration company and focused mainly at tungsten, with obviously some side assets in terms of the silver and the garnet and copper that would come out of those things. But yeah, could be solid investment.
Yeah, I think the next big value accretion event for Guardian has to be if there is any announcement on any kind of grant from the US defense, and also a feasibility or a pre-feasibility study for the Pilot Mountain asset. I think that in terms of value accretion, it needs something now on PFS and or something on the grant.
Yeah, there are a lot of catalysts. Even getting the results back from this particular deal that we've just struck could make a big difference as well, because all of a sudden you've got another significant amount of tonnage added to the tungsten, and they know it's there.
Presumably the remaining assay results for the remaining holes, as you alluded to on the podcast.
Yeah. Both of them are going to make a difference, because they're both going to increase the resource that they have access to.
Yeah. Okay, well, on a lighter note, anything else happening in your life? I mean, I suppose this is a good one for you. Is Halloween yesterday? Went into the city to do at the request of the daughters. What did they want to do on Halloween? They wanted to watch or go on a Jack the Ripper tour in Whitechapel. So we took them on that, and to be honest, they didn't have nightmares last night as you thought they were. I think the little one was a little bit like reluctant to switch the lights off, but ultimately really enjoyed it. If you've never done it, it's 2 hours. You go around Spitalfields Market, you go and have a look at some of the sites like Mitre Square where some of the murders happened. And it is actually really interesting. It's not so much forget the gory side of things. What intrigued me was the fact that there were so many different theories of who Jack the Ripper was. Was he Victoria's surgeon? Was he somebody related in the police force or the Freemasons at the time? And there was people covering up. Was the copycat murders? The murders continued in Canada and the US afterwards, so they thought it was an American guy who was part of the Freemasons. So there's so many theories, and it is interesting because they'll never know who actually ultimately did it because it got away with it. So it is an intriguing case. It really is. So I'd recommend it to everyone if you get the chance to do it.
Let's finish with a joke, because at the end of the day, after what everyone's gone through in the last few weeks, everyone's a bit annoyed. So this is a dad joke. Went swimming today, peed in the deep end. Lifeguard saw it. Blew his whistle so loud, I almost fell in the pool.
Classic. But on that note, we want to say thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe, hit the bell icon for any further notifications of future episodes, and have a great weekend.
Yep. Enjoy your sport, whatever it is you're going to watch or do.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.